UFC 273 at the weekend had some incredible fights. I mean, Chimaev and Burns had me standing up the whole time, just waiting to see what was going to happen next. And of course, Petr Yan vs Aljamain Sterling was a very close contest that I found really interesting to watch, to see who was going to come away with the win. But sometimes when you watch these UFC cards, because you're so invested in these guys and girls, it can leave you on a bit of a downer after watching the event, seeing some of your favourite fighters to lose. And UFC 273 was one of the biggest ones in UFC history for me personally. Alexander Volkanovski is one of my favourite fighters to watch. He's just incredible. I truly believe that he's second in the men's pound for pound rankings behind Kamaru Usman. I'd probably have Shevchenko maybe in between them, but if you're talking overall. But Volkanovski's incredible. I've been a huge fan of Volk for a long time, and watching him climb his way to the title was incredible. I was so high on him at the time. So for him to go all the way and past that is brilliant, and I love that. But his opponent on Saturday night is a fighter that, to me, seeing him win just means more. And Volkanovski put on a clinic against the Korean Zombie, a seminar, if you will, and maybe looked as good as we've ever seen him look in that cage. The fight was stopped in the 4th round, and it was a good stoppage from Herb Dean. I don't think anyone is debating that. Zombie is too tough for his own good, and to be honest, he never really looked in the fight, and it was getting a bit tough to watch. But tougher to watch was the post-fight aftermath with the Zombie in the cage. He seemed to suggest that he needs to go away and think about it, but this could be his last fight. Obviously, emotions are going to be running high after making it back to a title fight and losing it in the way he did. But I think that there probably is a little bit more to it than just that, than just the post-fight emotion. I don't know whether it's going to be Zombie's last ever fight, but at his point in the career he's had and the point he's at in it now, I think maybe it is a conversation about what his goal is at this point in his career, because the title does seem to have slipped from his grasp. So why does it mean more to me to watch the Zombie win or lose? Well, when I first got into MMA, I came into the sport as a pro wrestling fan as a kid. I was shown some very early MMA fights when I was quite young. And it was the personalities, those personas that people would take up that really grabbed me, similar to pro wrestling, you know? These people that you could look at as almost like fictional characters. That goes way back to my first ever favourite fighter, Chuck the Iceman Liddell, of course, and then Anderson the Spider Silva, of course, like one of everyone's favourite fighters, and being a huge horror fan as well. It was a no-brainer that as soon as I heard there was a man that only goes by the name the Korean Zombie, that I would seek him out. And this is the part, when I first started getting really into MMA, I wasn't just, I knew a few of the fighters, and I knew kind of what fights were happening at the time. When I started to really go back and look for older fights, watch fights from my favourite fighters that maybe I didn't already know about, and of course that led me to the Korean Zombie's Twister submission, the first at the time and only in the UFC. His submission win over Leonard Garcia, and then obviously that led to the WEC war that set up that rematch. It was at this point that I wasn't just being an MMA fan, I was trying to learn as much as I could about the sport and some of these fighters. I just became obsessed with it, was going back, watching old fights, finding out about fighters that I never knew about who came before some of my favourite fighters. And in this time, the Korean Zombie wasn't actively competing because he went to go do military service for South Korea, which obviously over there is compulsory. And this meant that I was able to catch up on basically his whole career and join the MMA community in anticipating his eventual comeback, which would be against Dennis Bermudez in 2017 when he got that first round finish. And that felt like a moment where I was in the MMA community, because I wasn't just looking at it from the outside and then going back and doing my research. I was there for when the Zombie came back, and I was finally able to watch a live fight that I hadn't known the result of before, of a fighter that I'd grown to love in the time that he had been gone. Now, of course, the Zombie has also fought other fighters that I love, like Brian Ortega is a guy that I really love watching, Yair Rodriguez as well, but there's something that when you have that that emotional connection to a fighter, especially someone who was instrumental in really getting you into the sport the way that the Zombie did for me. Just being a horror fan, I was like, this guy is incredible and so fun to watch fight every single time. It just means more, you know, like, I love Alex Volkanovski. An incredible performance. I can't wait to see what he does next. Hopefully that trilogy with Max Holloway, because I think that's the one, isn't it? And despite my love for the Zombie, I didn't really think he could beat Volkanovski. I just rate Alex that highly, you know. But when you're so connected to a fighter and you go through their career ups and downs with them, it means more. I think people know what I mean. And that's, I suppose, what this video is about. Not necessarily about whether this is the end of the Zombie's career, because I don't know if it is. He could come back. For me, the way that I look at it is, I'm a huge Zombie fan, and I didn't think he could beat Alex Volkanovski. I just think Volkanovski and Max Holloway are on another level at the moment. Because I think I would find it tough to pick Zombie against Max Holloway as well. It took him 9 years to get back to a title shot after that fight with Jose Aldo. Obviously, he went into the military service, and then he took a year to just train and get back to that routine. So, you know, realistically, not 9 years, probably more like 4 or 5. But he can't have another 3 years to get back to a title, essentially. And if Volkanovski goes on to beat Max Holloway, no one is asking to see that fight again. Max Holloway, maybe, that would be a fun fight. But it has to be a decision about what his goal is at this point in the sport, and whether he's okay with potentially spending the next few years of his life being the bridesmaid and never the bride, you know what I mean? Again, this video isn't about the Zombie retiring. It's about my reaction to the fight and why it meant so much to me watching that. Because I was on an all-time high after watching Chimaev Burns, and then it was just like slow decline. But it's been a hell of a ride, and his legacy is assured as one of the fan favourites in MMA history. I mean, the fact that they still don't even put his name on the graphics, it just says the Korean Zombie. I mean, that's legacy alone. Let me know in the comments, guys, which fighters do that for you. Which guys you just hate to see lose. I remember being in the arena for Till Masvidal was a weird one as well. Like, just a really strange atmosphere, because everyone was kind of bummed out by it. And then the 3-piece and a soda happened, and then, you know, the energy kind of picked back up again right after that. But UFC 273 was a lot of fun, despite me ranting on about how it ended in a bit of a sour way for me. But the card was really good, and I can't wait to see that Volkanovski-Holloway trilogy fight. Hit subscribe if you're on board with the content, guys, and I will see you on the next one in a bit.